After horrific political violence shocked Minnesota, the Ramsey County Sheriff explains the need to improve security at the Minnesota State Capitol. Next. Ramsey County Sheriff Bob Fletcher is my guest. Thank you, sir, for all you do. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate your time.
Well, obviously, as the sheriff, public safety is, of course, your focus. Certainly been difficult these past few weeks since the horrific political assassinations took place at the homes of former Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and Senator Hoffman. As with any investigation, there will be a thorough review, we know, of what happened in those early morning hours of June 14th. I know you have specific questions about the notification process. What can you tell us about that at this time?
Well, clearly there was a delay in notifying the potential targets. There was a delay in notifying law enforcement. And we didn't get a call until 7 o'clock in the morning, which is 3 to 4 hours after the incidents, the horrific incidents had occurred. But in talking to many legislators, they were not notified for at least 3 hours after Melissa and her husband and Gilbert were shot and killed. So we need to improve it. And I have a letter going off to several members of the public safety community trying to identify who is responsible for the lack of notification, and moving forward, who should be responsible in the future. And it's not acceptable. Of course, that term's used all the time, but more than that, every minute of delay in notifying the legislators put them at greater risk. And every minute that you didn't notify law enforcement of legislators living in their jurisdiction, it caused us to not be able to protect them. So, that we need to get to ground zero on how that happened. And I've talked to many legislators that are concerned about it as well.
Yeah, it seems there are a lot of questions awaiting answers at this point. And after these senseless tragedies, I know you also wrote a letter to Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan and explained the need to re-examine security measures at the Minnesota State Capitol, something I know that's been important to you for a very long time. You pointed out the need for screening at the Capitol entrances. And I think some people may find it surprising, Sheriff, that these security measures are not already in place as they are in most states. Is that right?
I think it is surprising to the general public that there isn't security at the Capitol. We began installing security in county courthouses after the attack of 9/11. We were the first county in Minnesota to have security at our courthouse entrances, but nearly every county in Minnesota has followed suit, over the last, earlier we're talking 25, 24 years. So, it's obvious on its face. TSA, the people are used to being screened, and they have an expectation that when they go inside that screening, they're going to be safe. So the Capitol, of course, is the last facility that really has not adopted some type of screening. And we're not just talking metal detection, because metal detection is important. We do metal detection at our courthouse. We work closely on the state fair security. Metal detectors are used there. You can put large volumes of people. I have toured Disney World's security strategy. They move large volumes of people through their courthouse, through their metal detection. So the technology is available. It's really, according to the legislature, balance between accessibility and safety. But we're at a stage now where the public would prefer to be safe in addition to having an accessible Capitol. And never has this country been more polarized politically, but also more extreme on either end.
You need to knock it off. Get away from my personal space and stop yelling in my face.
I'm standing right here.
I am giving you a lawful request to respect my personal space. You're defying that just as you have defied multiple lawful orders from officers to leave the room.
And have a willingness to carry out some type of unlawful act or an act of violence than we are now. And we've seen several instances of that in the last 5 years throughout the country. So we're foolish to think that our Minnesota Nice motto can protect people inside the Capitol. It simply cannot. So in January, I sent a letter to the Advisory Committee on Capitol Security, And they responded in March. The lieutenant governor responded in March, but I sense that they want to do something, but finding the political will and consensus is always the problem at the Capitol. And so I sent another letter basically outlining what I think are the key issues.
More in that letter, as you mentioned, Sheriff, it was back in January. You wrote this letter to the Advisory Committee on Capital Area Security, again chaired by Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, explaining the need to improve security. So again, this is more than 6 months ago. You said that despite some improvements made at the Capitol, that you, quote, remain concerned about the security of the legislature and the individuals who access the state office building, the Senate building, and the state Capitol. And you also said the United States has become more politically polarized than it has been in decades. The willingness for certain actors to resort to political violence, threats, and intimidation to those who have different views and beliefs are clearly on the rise. Unfortunately, it seems like your words somehow foreshadowed the tragedies that unfolded just a few weeks ago. I know this is a tough question here, but why wasn't something done back then, or why wasn't something more done back then?
I think getting a consensus at the legislature is always very difficult. And with a split House and a narrow margin in the Senate, I think there are a lot of different views on this that have a hard time reaching a consensus. But frankly, that is why this committee and the lieutenant governor have to show some leadership. And managing complex different opinions is important. And that's why my most recent letter, I tried to highlight for them the different types of issues that they should address. And I'm just going to read from my letter. Number one, members of the general public with large bags. That ought to be a kind of a no-brainer, right? In terms of people that are searched. Even if we don't have metal detection, we probably should, even if we don't have metal detection, we should search bags. A person today could bring in 5 or 6 weapons in a large duffel bag with multiple magazines, and no one would check them at the door. So that's the obvious one. Members of the general public in general could still bring weapons in. There are general public members with permits to carry, and that will have to be a policy discussion that the legislature will have to address. How are you dealing with permits to carry from the general public? Credentialed media, of course, we want in the Capitol. Capitol employees, and then Capitol employees with permits to carry. I believe that the law probably allows employees to carry a gun in their place of employment. And that extends also to legislators with permits to carry. I think the law also allows them to carry a gun at their place of employment. But there'll be controversy all over the board on many of those items, but there shouldn't be controversy on the general public being screened with large bags. And I would say the general public in general, because the technology allows us to do that very, very quickly. So as you work through the list, there'll be more controversy, but let's just start with the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, and come to an area that we can all agree on. The place would be much safer if the general public passed through metal detection. And you can do it with 4 entrances, one at the Capitol, one at the Senate building, state office building, and then one at the tunnel coming over from the East Complex. So would it be a little costly? Yes. Is it going to be worth it? Absolutely.
And just to remind our audience, it wasn't that long ago that the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office set up metal detectors at the entrances to the state fair. And we've seen before those measures have made a difference.
Yeah, and those, you have to have protocols in place. What we did at the fair is we provided lockers for people coming to the fair to lock their guns if they had a permit to carry. An easily accessible locker not far from the entrance. The courthouse has done the same. The Capitol complex could continue to provide some form of locker storage for persons that are coming to the Capitol. If there was a decision not to let people with permits to carry. But even if you allowed people with permits to carry, and which, by the way, right now they're all allowed in because no one is checking anyone. Even if you allowed them to carry, at least you would know who's in the building with a gun. key part. You would be able to screen and know that someone that has been through an extensive background check, etc., qualified with that weapon, you'd know who they are and that they're in the building.
And what kind of reaction are you getting to asking these questions at this point, Sheriff?
Let me say this. I haven't received any official response, but everyone I talked to, the governor indicated recently that he was interested in looking at security. So I think the governor is moving in that direction. The public safety commissioner I spoke to last week, he indicates everyone's moving in that direction. But really it comes down to the legislature itself. How do they want to provide for their own security internally? And that's important. But there are other issues, Liz, that are important as well. How about all the public events that legislators attend? They have no security under the state statute. It's only the governor, lieutenant governor, and a few key elected officials. What do we expect? Do we expect that they are on their own? I mean, some states have decided that they should have a pool of money for off-duty security to be available in public appearances, town halls, etc. So somehow we need to take the next step too of providing some type of safety when our legislators, especially our legislative leaders like Melissa was, when they're outside of their home. Of course, none of that will ever stop what happened to her at her home, because that's the last place you expect to be victimized. And that's what's so horrific about what happened here, is that at 2:00, Senator Hoffman and his wife, of course, were shot and injured. And an hour and a half later, Melissa and her husband and dog were shot and killed. We ought to be good enough. Let's just face it. We ought to be good enough in an hour and a half to be able to identify the threat and notify people. And I've analyzed, I have a large document here of the timeline. If Senator Ann Rest could have a squad car checking on her at 2:36 in the morning, following the 2:00 attack on Senator Hoffman, then we ought have been strong enough to get help to Melissa's house before 3:30. So there's really there's no reason to explain that hour and a half delay. And I know that some people like to say, didn't we do a great job? The fact of the matter is we would have done a great job if Melissa was alive and we had an hour and a half to provide some form of security there. And that should be troubling to all of us. And not to mention the fact that it was another 3 hours before other legislators got notice of the pending threat.
Yeah, really important points to bring up, Sheriff. Thank you for having the courage to do so. We so appreciate your work. We hope to see you live on patrol real soon. I know so many of our viewers tune in religiously to that. But again, thank you for being here.
Thank you for your interest. Appreciate the time.
That will do it for this episode of Liz Collin Reports. We'll see you next time.